Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Paratruth Radio is a proud member of Evergreen Podcasts on KillerPodcast.com.
Christian and non-Christian paranormal investigators. They have two different views, and it seems as if neither of them can ever agree on anything. So what happens when a mainstream view of the paranormal crosses paths with the Christian view? Something epic. This is Paratruth Radio.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Paratruth Radio. As always, my name is Erik.
And I'm Justin.
And as far as I know, that's not changing. Hopefully. I don't know.
I mean, we might just have to become Just Rick.
Let's not even start that. We've got friends who will take that way too seriously.
Or Ariston.
Jeez. Anyway, folks, it's December 4th when you're listening to this episode. So that means we're kicking off the Christmas season. Holy crap. I hope everybody had a really good Thanksgiving. I know we skipped last week, so I know that's kind of a delay on our happy Thanksgiving, or hope you had a good Thanksgiving, thing that we do every year. Anyway, with that said, we decided to kick off the Christmas season.
Before we move forward, did you get a chance to get a recording of the Gobble Squatch?
Shit. I totally forgot. Oh man. I was thinking about it Wednesday night too. So I was out Wednesday night, the night before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, I was like, I really should put this in my calendar. And then, I'm getting older and my mind just drifted and I forgot all about it. And then, I forgot. Dang it. Now I won't know till next year.
Set it on your calendar for next year.
Right now for next year, 2023. Thanksgiving 2023, Gobble Squatch. We'll set it for 8 p.m.
There you go.
So the answer is, no, I forgot. Dang it. I really wanted to do a live session too. I was like looking forward to it that entire week. Let myself down again.
Well, with your parents living in an area that's kind of wooded, it would be kind of cool.
Too.
Yeah.
That was the plan. But, my life is just full of regret. I just keep adding to it. Just keep digging that hole. I'll bury myself in it eventually.
You'll get
there. So today we decided to go ahead and kick off our Christmas season, not by talking about Christmas, but instead having a guest on to talk about Ouija boards and talking boards. His name is John Kozik, and he grew up in America's hometown, Plymouth, Massachusetts, where he was close with his grandmother, Franny. So close, in fact, that some of his earliest memories are watching her use a Ouija board. Her hands would fly across the board, with each message rubbing more and more of the ink away. After she passed, John inherited her worn board, sparking his collecting obsession. Now, John is a musician, writer, and manager, recording and touring the world over the past 30 years and appearing on over 40 records to date. He is a founding member and treasurer of the Talking Board Historical Society, a nonprofit that researches, preserves, and celebrates the history of talking boards. In 2019, John opened the Salem Witchboard Museum, the world's only museum dedicated to the history and lore of Ouija and talking boards. So without further ado, let's go to the line with John Kozik. John, welcome to Paratruth Radio. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. I met you last month, actually, when I happened across your the Salem Witchboard Museum. I didn't know it existed, actually, before going out there, and I was pleasantly surprised to find one because my cousin and I have talked about Ouija boards a lot over the years. So meeting someone like yourself who's extremely knowledgeable in this device is really cool. So one thing I want to do is just kind of get the backstory as to how you got it started collecting Ouija boards and what really, I guess what sparked your interest in them.
Yeah, well, it started with my grandmother. I inherited her board, and before I inherited it, I would see her use it by herself in a room with other people, and she would go very fast on it. She could move the planchette super fast, and she would yell out letters and numbers quicker than anyone could write them down. But I was never allowed to be in that room with her, so I'd spy from like a top stair or through the window. And when she passed away in the late 90s, I inherited the board, and I went online to learn a little bit more about it, and I was just blown away. I had always thought that the Ouija board pretty much looked like that traditional Parker Brothers style, and what I found was hundreds, if not thousands, of different boards. And so I became just very obsessed with wanting to know as much as I could about them. And of course, I'm a collector, so I've started collecting them as many as I could find. And about 6 years into collecting, I finally met a few other collectors, Robert Murch and my friend Calvin Von Crush, and we ended up forming the Talking Board Historical Society. So I'm part of a registered nonprofit, and we research, preserve, celebrate the history of these boards. And, excuse me, 3 years ago, I opened the museum, which is the world's only Ouija board museum. And just a few months back, I left my job of 22 years to just work at the museum full time. So inheriting that board is really where it starts, and sent me down quite the rabbit hole.
Oh.
That is an interesting story in and of itself. Not just inheriting the Ouija board from your grandmother, but then it's spiraling into this lifelong pursuit. Now, Eric and I have also had experiences with Ouija boards. We haven't just talked about them. We've had experiences with them at an early age. Something that I have found for a very long time, and Eric had kind of mentioned this to me, that you believe them that to be tools, which I do agree. They're tools to people that are honed and have learned to protect themselves and use the Ouija board as a tool. But something that has bothered me for years, and I want your opinion on this, is that, as you mentioned, Parker Brothers basically markets this as a game, as a toy. And I don't think that that's right or fair to be subjecting unknowing kids to something that they should be taught to use. And there's nothing against them using that if the parents are knowledgeable and can teach them the proper way to use it. But what are your thoughts on it being marketed as a game?
Well, I mean, certainly that's where most of the negative association comes with, the fact that it's marketed to kids and they have access to it and they don't take it seriously. But it's always been considered a game. It's actually patented as a game and taxed as a game. That's how we get to where we are. But interesting enough, to take you back a little ways to the history a little bit to how we get to where we are, is in 1890, when it was patented by Elijah Bond and his sister-in-law Helen Peters. It shouldn't have been patented, first of all, because it already existed in this homemade form that had been used for, couple 20, 30 years.
Right.
And so patenting it as a game was their greatest chance of getting it patented. So it gets patented as a game, and this is kind of the beginning of the IRS. And actually, the manufacturers are not paying taxes. In 1920, the IRS went looking for back taxes owed, and they actually submitted bills to all of the talking board companies. And one of them in particular, the Baltimore Talking Board Company, they claimed they weren't a game. They were something else. And they actually sued the IRS. And they took it to court, and the court ruled it a game. And then they took it up to the Supreme Court, who refused to hear the case. So it was always considered a game. The only difference is in 1890, when it came out, there were no toy stores. And you went to a general store and you looked through a catalog, ordered your goods, and had it delivered. Toy stores do start to appear around, say, 1920, and those manufacturers working with wood are definitely, working with doll houses and pull toys and those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But Parker Brothers taking it over in 66, the very first year it outsells Monopoly. 1 million boards are sold, and that is a whole different level of now it's more closely associated as being a game and marketing as such. But I agree with you, people using the board should have some responsibility to it and have a little bit of education about it. And that is certainly almost all the negative stories you hear are because of kids not really taking it seriously.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, I noticed, like, as I was walking around museum, and for those of you who are listening tonight, I visited this museum last month, and one thing that I noticed is that many of those boards that you have are coming from various states. Like, I don't know if you have any from other countries or not, but definitely from other states. And one in particular that I came across or that I noticed was, of course, one that looked like it was from was it Goldsmith Publishing Company in Cleveland, Ohio. Now everyone knows I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. So, like, how does that work? Like, were people able to, or were there various companies that were able to take license and produce their own version, or like how does that work?
So when Ouija gets patented in 1890. The patent gives them 16 years exclusivity before anyone else could make a talking board. Mm-hmm. And a talking board is really defined as, an alphabet board with a pointing device. And so after that, 1907, then yes, anyone can make a talking board. They can call it a mystic board, a mystery board. They just can't use the word Ouija, which is a brand name. And so the history of that brand is manufacturers constantly trying to steal it, whether they misspell it like WHEEGEE or just steal it outright and spell it correctly and try to get away with it as long as they can. So really in the museum, you see just in the 1940s probably close to 50 different manufacturers making the board during World War II.
Okay, so it's just the fact of, like, people trying to find loopholes and profiting off of it.
Exactly. I mean, it's very popular during the war, and so most of the companies are kind of cashing in on it while it's popular, and then as soon as that war is over, most of them go away.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's why they're very rare. Most of the stuff in the museum, on average, if I told you that there's less than 50 known of each of those boards, it's a pretty high number, because they just couldn't, once the war was over, or people weren't interested, they couldn't compete against the brand, or they infringed on the brand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So out of all the Ouija boards that you have in the museum, do any of them have to be, like, kept away or locked away in under glass or anything because of any type of attachments or anything?
Well, I mean, there are 4 boards in the museum right now that were donated. They're part of a larger collection of about 30 that have been donated over the years to the Talking Board Historical Society. Those 3 of them are behind glass. 1 is just mounted to the wall. But actually, for me, there's no activity on them that I feel people are drawn to them. Certainly, a lot of people are drawn to those certain boards. But for me, I just view it as the tool and not necessarily as the person or entity that you're speaking with. And so my logic behind them is to think of them more like a cell phone. And so, if you used my cell phone and had a bad conversation with it, I wouldn't necessarily sage it or break it or burn it, something like that. So with the boards, they're not necessarily behind glass because anything happens. It's just that that's just the way they're displayed in the museum.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But staying on the idea of the negative impact that some boards have had with people, or people have had with boards, I did notice that in the museum there was a particular board with a letter that was written on the side or a note, and I wasn't there for the entire conversation, but I overheard you talking to another group of people when I was there about that. Could you just kind of share little details on that particular board?
Sure. That one I think is pretty interesting. I kind of keep it up because it's made in 2017 and it's from the TV show Stranger Things. So it's a fairly recent board.
Mm-hmm.
But what's funny about it is, it changes a lot of people's ideas about how old something is to be haunted. Typically most people tend to think something has to be very old, usually not as recent as 2017. The previous owner of the board had a bad experience with it, and they spent $15 to $20 to mail it away, and they didn't put a return address on the package. They put a note inside with the board, and the note basically says, if you find it, forward it to the Talking Board Historical Society. Trust me, you don't want it. And so for me, I'm okay that I don't know the whole story. I know that it must have been bad, and they were obviously worried that the board was going to find its way back to them.
Okay. Now, in your personal opinion, is that a possibility of something like that happening? Like, you hear stories all the time about, oh yeah, I burned this Ouija board, but the next day it was in my closet.
I hear those stories all the time. I hear people, throwing them away and they're finding a way back. And I believe they believe that for sure.
Okay.
That's an interesting comment, actually, that you just made, that you believe that they believe that for sure. Just in your opinion, so if someone were to say that they burned or threw away Ouija board and then it reappeared, obviously you weren't there. None of us were there to witness that. So do you think there's a possibility that they're making something up just for the story, or is it more so of, I don't know, like they threw it away and then they were spiritually driven to take it back and put it in their house without recognition of it happening?
Now, I'll start off by telling you, first of all, I don't use the Ouija board. So,
Okay.
I want to put it in perspective for any listeners out there, as I don't use the board. And I don't use it because I'm afraid of it or anything like that. Quite the opposite. I don't use it because my grandmother had such a strong connection to the board. I just don't. When I try to use it, it doesn't work the same way for me. And so because I'm also a musician, my popular comparison would be, if Jimi Hendrix was my father, I wouldn't want to play guitar. I'm not going to be as good on guitar. So to put it in perspective, as far as, what I believe about people using the board, I don't use it. So, I would not call myself an expert on using the board. But that being said, I've heard hundreds, if not thousands of stories. People come in the museum just to tell me their story. And I have yet to hear any story where I think the person is lying to me. So I believe they've experienced whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
So when I hear stories of people using a board inside their house and it started raining in the house, or when they lit a board on fire and it came back to them, I don't believe those things are possible. But I believe they believe those things happened.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, you mentioned that your grandmother was good with the board and used it. Probably a dumb question, but did she consider herself a psychic or a medium?
I don't believe so. It's hard to say because I didn't have those conversations with her about it. I would say she's a very spiritual woman, for sure.
Okay.
She aligned very closely with Native Americans, not only with the Wampanoag tribe down Cape Cod, where she would go to the wigwams and their retreats, but also the Seminole Indians down in Florida. And so definitely a very spiritual person. And using the board, besides a few stories that I've heard, using it, ask about my aunt's relationship or define certain things. Those are the only real things that I know that she really used it for. But like I said, she was very fast on it. So she definitely had a very strong connection to it.
Okay.
Now, one thing I do want to ask is how, either in your professional opinion or in your own research or your studies, how did pop culture have an impact on the Ouija board? And was it, in your opinion, a positive or negative impact?
I mean, I think today you would say it's a negative impact for sure. There's only really horror movies about this board. There's not really rom-coms or, comedies about this. So of course that's going to be in a negative light, but it's been in pop culture from the beginning. I mean, you're talking songs written about the Ouija board in the 1920s that were love songs, asking the Ouija to help find them love. Certainly the covers of all the magazines, everything from Popular Science to Saturday Evening Post with Norman Rockwell. So, it's been in pop culture from the beginning. It's never really gone away, but today it's changed quite a bit from, like when I mentioned those 1920s magazine covers, those covers, there's nothing negative on there. There's kids using it, couples, women using it alone. It's just not viewed the same way people think of it today. But certainly with horror movies and whatnot, and also being marketed to kids, then that's where, today it's more of a negative light.
Right.
Now, have there ever been any stories that you've come across that stick out more than others?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, I can tell you that most of the stories I hear when people come in the museum, for instance, they're coming to tell me stories that people didn't believe them or they laughed at them. They want some validation as to what happened. And most of those stories would be negative stories. But a few months ago now, a woman from New Zealand actually came in and she told me that she had lost her son about 5 years ago. And first of all, I can't imagine that kind of pain or that loss that she has. But she told me she uses the Ouija board and what that means to her. She was in the museum for pretty close to 2 hours talking to me about those conversations. And that's a nice reminder for me, as to why this board exists. It comes out to help people who have suffered loss, who are looking for answers, finding comfort and closure from them. And those kind of stories, sadly, I don't hear them as often as I would like.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there a particular board within your collection that really either A, sticks out to you or just you find most favor or in?
I do. I mean, I love all of them, truly, but my favorite board is this metal board that I have from the 1930s. And it was pretty unique, the fact that it was metal. The planchette that came with it, which I don't have, it's like the grail that I hunt for every day, is a metal planchette that had ball bearing casters. It had a battery and a light bulb inside of it. And there's little bumps on the board. And when the planchette passed over it, it would light up or flicker. And so today we only know of 7 of those boards, only 4 planchettes to still exist. And when that became available, it was being sold as part of a large collection, a guy that would not sell the one item. And so within 2 hours, I secured the funding. I rented a car. I picked up my best friend Merch in Boston, and we drove 21 hours straight down to Florida to get it. And it was quite the adventure to do that with him. And while we were driving there, other people were trying to make their own deals. And really, we didn't know until we got there if the guy would still honor the deal. But for me, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to own that board. And Merch, he actually was able to hunt down the president of Ouija back in 1933, this guy named Hubert Fold. And he got to interview him on his deathbed about the board. And so he brought the board to him, and Hubert was lying in bed. He handed it to him, and Hubert took it and smiled and handed it right back. He was like, I never want to see that board again. It's something he hadn't seen in probably close to 70 years. But he was reminded, he almost ruined the family business. And in that interview, he says that the failure was justified because he shouldn't have messed with the success of the Ouija. So even in 1933, during that depression, they still had 3 factories in Baltimore that were producing that one board. So it's not that people didn't want to use the Ouija board. They just didn't want to spend a little bit more money, $5, for something they could get for $1.50, which was the average price.
Right.
So that's my favorite board in the museum for sure.
So, I mean, one, do you know exactly how many of those particular type of boards are produced, and what happened to the majority of them if there's only so many that we know of in existence?
I can't tell you how many were made total
Okay.
to begin with, but I can tell you that when World War II came, they scrapped them for the war.
Got it. Okay.
So, this was made in the 30s, and of course it didn't sell very well, and so by World War II, they ended up scrapping them. And today, right, as of this moment, there's 7 boards, 4 planchettes, and hopefully more will come out.
Mhm.
So something that I've seen recently, and it's interesting to me. I'm sorry, not GameStop. Ghost Stop has invented kind of like an electronic Ouija board. It's a electronic device that's got letters A through Z, smiley faces, numbers, all this type of other stuff on there, almost like a cell phone basically, but it's just plain text, and there can be an audio aspect to it. But what is your opinion or thoughts on electronic versus the classic board?
I've not seen one of these in myself. I've heard a few people talk about them. It certainly sounds interesting, and anything that really helps Ouija or talking boards, remain popular, I'm all for it. But I would suppose that I would be more of a traditional person where I'm a collector. I tend to like, items and objects and hunting them down. And that's the same thing with like digital media and things like that, where it's like, no, I want the hard copy. I want to have something in my hand that I can look at anytime or things like that. So that would be my first. But if it's working, then I'm all for it.
Okay.
So far up to this point, the Ouija board and just the talking board in general is very popular. We've always come across people who are either using it or who have experience with it. Do you think, like trying to think forward to the future, that the physical Ouija board or talking board, is that something that you think is really here to stay, or do you think it's truly like a dying breed, especially as more technology comes out and now apparently we have these digital versions of the talking board? Just what are your thoughts on that?
I haven't really given it too much thought. I mean, for me, I guess, it's hard. You're making me think, I've been a musician, like I said, and I've seen that industry change quite a bit. You're talking about working on movies. You've seen everything change to this more digital way. It makes sense that that's where things would go. But I don't know. I mean, part of the Ouija board today is having it at a sleepover party and having people have their hands on it and touch multiple people. I don't know if using a phone or some kind of digital version of it, you would get that same vibe or same feel, but I suppose you're right. It could definitely go that way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, over the years, from what I've learned and what I understand about the Ouija board is, when you make contact with a spirit of some sort, it has to use your own energy to move the planchette. So in a way, it uses you. And I just don't really see how that works digitally. There's this idea that spirits, they gain energy off of off of electronics. We see in ghost hunts and stuff where people, their batteries fizzle out, or certain digital devices go dead. They believe that's because it's energy being drawn from there. So I don't know if that's the reason why they can use these digital devices. But, and I don't know if you know anything about this or not, but when it comes to using the Ouija board, I know you don't partake in it. What is do you know what the process is to actually sitting down and using the Ouija board? Do you have to have your head, is it like meditation where you have to have your head clear and allow yourself the ability to be open to a spiritual whatever to have this happen?
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
My friend Karen Dahlman, she's used the board for over 50 years, and I've picked up a few things, when she talks about using the board. And really, it starts with intent, number one. Obviously, positive intentions will help bring positive results. But really, you can influence that board quite a bit, whether you know it or not. And so, silly superstitions like using it alone, if you believe you shouldn't use it alone and you do, there's a good chance that the experience you have, it's influenced. You believe you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. So it really is about your headspace and your positive intentions. And I think also sometimes some people are, you know, better using it than others. Or just like my grandmother, where it just flew out of her hands. You know, she was very fast, and it does not work the same for me. So I think, you know, part of it is, like for me, I'm very worried that it's not going to work like it did for her, and I think I'm going to influence it into not working well for me. So you know, it is definitely all about your intentions and just really what you bring to it, and that's why it works differently for everybody. You know, you using it in whatever conversation you have, and then you know, Justin using it next, probably totally different experience using it.
Okay.
Now, kind of going along that, what kind of advice can you give somebody that wants to explore it but aren't really sure about it? Like, as far as intention and all that, what can they do to be in a good mindset to interact with the boards?
I mean, it goes by the person, but I mean, they could be everything from, you know, having a picture of somebody with them, their lucky coin, something that they feel comfortable doing, lighting candles or saying a prayer. There's quite a few things that can help you put into this environment that you're in to do that. I would definitely suggest, though, if you're, you know, a little apprehensive to use the board, you probably shouldn't, you know. And if you seriously want to, then like I mentioned, that my friend Karen, she has a YouTube channel where she goes over a lot of these different things, and it's something that I always kind of push people towards, to like watch those videos and kind of see what resonates with you as to how you'd want to set yourself up to want to use it. Because I tell people that if they're nervous, you shouldn't do it.
So basically, setting the intention to protect yourself without necessarily protecting yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, that sounds right. Yes.
It would be similar as, like, you know, being noticeably afraid of an animal, especially something like a dog or some sort of creature that can hurt you, because they kind of sense that. You don't want to be around,
Yes.
you know, a shark if you're going to be scared, because that's going to get them all riled up. So in the same sense, you want to be careful around the Ouija board, because you never know what you're really going to conjure up based on your own emotions.
No, I think that's a good analogy for sure. And I would just remind people that, you know, if they do have it and they've, you know, seen horror movies or heard bad stories about it, just always, for me, keeping it the perspective of like a cell phone, where you just stop talking.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. You know, if you don't like the way the conversation's going, you just stop.
Okay.
Now, on that kind of mindset, I'm not sure if it's in the instructions or not for the Ouija board, but a lot of people say you should say goodbye or give some type of indication that the conversation is over and you're disconnecting. What are your beliefs on that?
I believe that if you believe that, then absolutely you should definitely do that. You want to have the best experience possible, and but not everybody does believe that. For me, I don't believe it. I don't say goodbye to most people I talk to in a day, and so I don't believe I need to or would have to on a board. But really, it's going to work based on what your beliefs are. So I always tell people, you know, they're like, well, can't be too safe, you know, do it anyways. Then sure, you know,
Okay.
but it's not really a rule to do that. No.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the rules that people tend to think of are really just, you know, what feels right to them. You know, if I was to tell you the real rules of the board, you would laugh, because it's all about marketing, and it's really marketing it as a dating tool. You know, the rules on the board say it's best played between a man and a woman with the board on your lap. So now, you know, your knees are touching, you're in a dim lit room, you're unchaperoned. And so that's really, you know, why that Ouija board in 1920 is so popular. Is because it's more of a dating game. But those are the rules in 1920. So today, when people think about, you know, saying goodbye or using it alone or in a graveyard, Those are all, just really personal preference and probably from superstitions or stories that they've heard. And, it's going to work based on what you believe on those.
Mm-hmm. So that's really interesting because, I mean, I know my cousin knew that it was a dating game initially. I did not, so that's news to me. But with that said, it's very intriguing to see how much has changed over these last, however many years, 100 years or so, that has really shaped the way we see the Ouija board. Going from something like a dating game to something that you can easily reach out to loved ones or learn about whether loved ones are safe in enemy territory, to being something based on pop culture that could be relatively negative and conjure up something really dark that can be haunting you for God knows how many years. It's just really weird how easily this thing has changed based on the culture.
Yeah, I mean, there were negative stories from the very beginning. In the museum, I talk about the first suicide by 1900 and murders by the 1930s, all associated with the Ouija board. But most people didn't view it that way. When you see in the museum how it's portrayed in pop culture, like I said, those magazine covers, dating tool, that's really how it goes, almost until like the early 1970s. And really, that movie, The Exorcist, did change quite a bit of people's views on the Ouija board.
Mm-hmm.
That specific, superstition that people have that you shouldn't use it alone comes from that movie. Prior to that movie, during a war, women would use them alone to speak to a deceased husband, a father, brother or son. And that movie really changed. That superstition certainly comes about and just changed a lot of people's views about it. And what I think is pretty fascinating about that is in the movie, they never clearly tell you that's how she became possessed, was she used the Ouija board alone. So, you got to think this is before cable TV, it's before video rental. You see that movie in the theater, which, don't forget, people were getting sick in the theater and ran out of the theater when that came out. But you see that scene, and, a couple years later, someone pulls a Ouija board out at a party. You might be like, yeah, I don't really feel like using it. But you don't know why you're thinking that. It just subliminally, that seed plants itself in your head. And so, that movie certainly inspired more horror movies to be made from it. And, the Vietnam War ended not too long after that. And that was really the last major war for the U.S. that had a draft. And so, less people are really using it for the positive, trying to get those answers, reach their deceased loved ones. And now more people are just kind of, hey, is anybody here? Anyone want to talk? Or, like I said, using it as a dare game or something like that. So that movie helps to change what most people now view about the Ouija board.
Okay.
So bringing that movie up, do you think the Satanic Panic from the 70s and 80s kind of had also a negative impact on the talking boards?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That comes out after The Exorcist as well. And, I've seen lists. I don't know how accurate it is, but I've seen the Ouija board on the same banned list as Dungeons and Dragons and yoga. So, but certainly it makes the list. And, what's funny about that time frame is if I had to guess the second most popular country that these boards were made, were popular in, it's probably Mexico. And most of the Mexican boards that I've seen all tend to be early 80s, almost like Satanic Panic era boards. So,
okay.
Well, we are, of course, unfortunately, at the end of our episode. So there are two things I want to ask you to do. One is, of course, just tell everybody where they can find you. And the other is, what is one thing that you'd like to leave our listeners in regard to the Ouija board? Like, if you could tell anybody just one thing about the Ouija board that's probably most important, what would that be?
All right, well, let's see. You can visit me, obviously, Salem Witchboard Museum on Instagram and Facebook and the website. And also, if you're in Salem, I suggest coming 127 Essex Street, the heart of downtown Salem, close to the Hawthorne Hotel. And as far as one thing you'd want to know about the Ouija board, it's probably Jeez, that's a great question. You kind of stumped me. I don't know what to think. I don't. You have to edit this. I don't know. Damn. I guess for me, I would explain it that I love everything about this Ouija board. I love the good and the bad, and you can't have one without without the other. And so, do I think people should use the board responsibly? Yes. But am I kind of glad when people don't use the board responsibly? Absolutely. I want to hear those stories. People come to the museum to tell me those stories. So, to me, I just love everything about the Ouija board. And but if you want to use it and you're nervous, then you should probably do some more research on it.
All right. Well, thank you, John, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, folks, that was John Kozik, founder, manager of the Ouija Board Museum. Erik?
Founding member? Did you say manager? You did.
I did.
Yeah. Well, he's founding member and treasurer of the Talking Board Historical Society, and he is the founder of the Salem Witch Board Museum, an owner.
So make sure you check that out. If you're in Salem, I do encourage you guys to check it out because Erik has told me about it, and I definitely need to make that a stop once I'm able to get out to Salem and all that area as well. But we're going to take a quick break. You're going to hear a quick commercial, and we will be right back with Paratruth Radio.
Don't you know that you're a grown-up?
I'm a grown-up.
Me too.
Yep, me too. But these days being a grown-up can really suck.
Luckily, we're grown-ups who grew up in the coolest generation.
We had video arcades.
And also some of the best TV and movies ever made.
We lived the origin of awesome consumer electronics. The list goes on and on.
Yep, Generation X.
Exactly.
And we're Gen X grown-up.
Every week, the Gen X Grown Up podcast explores media, tech, toys, games, and more from both yesterday and today.
Through the eyes of Generation Xers who absolutely love that stuff. You can find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.
Or find us on our website, genxgrownup.com.
Life sucks as a grown-up.
All right, you think that was good enough?
I hope so, man. I'm tired.
Who listens to a promo on a podcast and then goes and listens to a different podcast?
Right.
I've never done it.
Right.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Paratruth Radio. As always, my name is Erik.
And I'm Justin.
And we just got off the line with John. I'm so sorry. We're going to have to edit that.
No, we're keeping that in.
Oh, great. We just got off the line with John Kozik. He is, of course, the owner of the museum and founding member and treasurer of the Talking Board Historical Society. Now, you guys, I'd imagine if you're this far into the show, you've listened to the beginning. I don't know why people would press play and then skip forward, but I don't know.
They don't want to listen to us do the intro or talk about our nonsense that we usually do.
But yeah, last October, you guys know I went to Salem. We did an entire episode on that during our Halloween special with Kat. And, the Salem Witch Board Museum was one of those things that I didn't see my first day. And thankfully, I went back to Salem for a second day and I happened to come across it, which is really weird because I hadn't gone into this. So the museum sits behind another store, like it's within the store in a back room. And so I'd gone into the store the day prior and didn't notice it. And then the second day I did. So I was like, well, shit. Yeah, I'm definitely stopping in there. And it's really cool. After all these years of talking about it, using the board, we've had so many episodes about the Ouija board just between Justin and I, and of course with guests who've used it or who've had some sort of experience with it or know but somebody who has. It was kind of cool to see the full history of this board at this museum. So as Justin said prior to the break, if you're going to Salem, be sure to check it out. You can also check out a lot of the photos and stuff on Instagram. There's a ton of stuff on there. But yeah, it's really cool, man.
And I'm glad that he did address basically what I had asked him about selling it to kids, that I actually never realized that it was marketed as a game from the very beginning. Even going way back before it was actually patented and all that. But with the Christmas right around the corner, which technically this is our Christmas kickoff episode because we unfortunately were not able to record last week. But if you're going to get a Ouija board for your kids, at least do some research. Educate children on that it is a tool and that it needs respect before they're just going out and, basically bringing up some negative entity, demon or otherwise, whatever you want to call it, and not protecting themselves or treating the board with respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think going in and using a Ouija board is very similar to what we've talked about in Ghost Hunting 101. And that is going in with a particular mindset that is clearing any negative energy from yourself, not walking in with negative thoughts, things like that. Anything that's going to help ward off any negative entities from attaching itself to you. One thing that I wouldn't say we learned in the whole study of paranormal history, but it's something that I think is pretty common knowledge amongst many of our peers, is that spirits don't travel alone, at least, not on purpose. They I think most of them think they are, but there's always another spirit traveling not far behind. So where there's one, you're probably going to find more than that. And when it comes to opening doors, it's hard to discern exactly what that door is that you're opening, because you may be trying to open it to something good and accidentally open a door to something darker. So that is something you really have to be careful of. But other than that, I guess have fun if you're going to do it, right? Enjoy it. So one thing that I was thinking about, because, we were talking about whether to use the Ouija board alone or with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think the idea of using it alone is a safer bet than using it with other people, because you don't know the intention of those other people that you're with necessarily.
Right.
So that is something that I know we've talked in the past, like you should always do it with somebody else, but now this whole conversation has got me rethinking that. That's something to think about.
Well, in the past, actually, we've said don't do it. Because, well, right, because, and this is why, because people don't go into it with good intentions. I hate saying it that way, but we don't. We go in it, oh, it's a game, nothing's gonna happen. Don't give any respect to the board at all, or any entities that would be herein said interacting with you. My opinion of the Ouija board has changed over the years, especially even since starting Paratruth Radio. It is a tool. It is something that can be used to communicate with the other side. But my biggest concern, and John did not really alleviate my concerns about this, is it being patented towards children. Yes, originally it was patented more towards lovers and all of that stuff, but Parker Brothers is basically out for the almighty dollar. They're out to sell this thing without any regard of what it's going to do to somebody. Like John said, if you have any type of negativity towards the board, obviously you should not use it, because that's what you're going to attract.
Right.
And that's one thing that Parker Brothers is not going to tell you, is that you absolutely have to have good intentions with it and have absolute respect for the board itself.
Right. But with that said, assuming you don't believe in any of this, that the board can work, or that you you don't even believe in the spiritual realm. I mean, you're going in without any intention whatsoever, just a game. Is there a chance that nothing would happen anyway? I mean, if you're going in with that kind of mindset, you're already tuned out to or closing yourself off. For some people, that might just be a thing, especially for some of these kids who think it's nothing more than a game, and they're not actually opening doors the way we think they might be.
Well, John, I mean, mentioned that himself. He doesn't think he can do anything with the board like his grandmother could. And so he feels it's not going to interact with him at all, or not as well as with his grandmother. So, yeah, I truly think that if you go into it thinking nothing is going to happen, then nothing's going to happen. Using the Ouija board when we were kids, I had kind of started out that way, as nothing's going to happen, and it would never move. Or we would be doing with somebody else, and their thoughts were nothing's going to happen, or they would just intentionally move the planchette to answer the questions that that they're doing or asking. So I do have to tend to agree with you that if you're going to do it, either do it by yourself or do it with somebody that you trust is going to have good intentions, or have at least an open mind that you're going to be interacting with something or somebody from the other side.
Right. Absolutely.
So
I guess we're on the same page. With that said, I think it's time to wrap up this show for real this time. And so, I mean, it's at this point, it's December. I mean, Christmas is a few weeks away, which, again, we've said it every month since September. It's crazy how fast it's all moving.
Right.
But with that said, we've got plenty of stuff to share with you guys for our Christmas episodes. And of course, the big celebration of Christmas itself, and then probably one of our biggest celebrations aside from Halloween, which is New Year's. So we do have some good stuff coming along shortly. But I don't know, any housekeeping things, anything you wanted to share that's happening this month, or?
Well, with the release of this episode, it's December 4th. We've got literally a week to do some stuff for Christmas, and then that following week is our Christmas episode, and then actually we may even release our New Year's episode a little bit early as well, because, well, it'll be New Year's Day when we release it, but New Year's Eve.
It's been a while since we've done a New Year's Day release.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we'll do our traditional All Lang Syne song at the end of our New Year's episode, and we're hoping to do a roundtable. It just really depends on how quickly we can plan stuff. If not, it'll just be me and Erik for our Christmas episode, possibly for the New Year's episode, unless we decide to bring in some non-paranormal friends, I guess.
Yeah. Actually, I have a couple ideas. So that's something we'll talk about after we close this out here. But
all right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of great stuff coming up. Unfortunately, with my new job that I just started, I've been a little behind on things, but things are finally calming down to where I can actually start recording regularly again. So we've got so much great stuff coming for you guys. Christmas is right around the corner, and holy crap, we're almost in 2023. Yeah.
Yep.
2022. I mean, we've talked about in the past about how quickly stuff is going by. Even the whole 2020 pandemic, 2021 kind of post-pandemic, and now we're in 2022. 2022 has flown by.
Yeah.
Like,
And guess what?
It feels like it has not been more than a day before that we were celebrating 2022, and now we're in 2023.
Yep. And 2023 is going to go even faster because you know how it works.
Oh.
The older you get, the faster it moves, man. So every year.
And the more technology we get, I think it kind of moves even faster too.
Yeah. Well, anyway, with that said, folks, until next week, you'll find us right here, same time, same place. My name is Eric.
And I'm Justin.
Peace.
Don't you know that you're a grown-up?
I'm a grown-up.
Me too.
Yep, me too. But these days being a grown-up can really suck.
Luckily, we're grown-ups who grew up in the coolest generation.
We had video arcades.
And also some of the best TV and movies ever made.
We lived the origin of awesome consumer electronics. The list goes on and on.
Yep, Generation X.
Exactly.
And we're Gen X grown-up.
Every week, the Gen X Grown Up podcast explores media, tech, toys, games, and more from both yesterday and today.
Through the eyes of Generation Xers who absolutely love that stuff. You can find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.
Or find us on our website, genxgrownup.com.
Life sucks as a grown-up.
All right, you think that was good enough?
I
hope so, man. I'm tired.
Who listens to a promo on a podcast and then goes and listens to a different podcast?
Right.
I've never done it.
Right.
Looking for excitement? Chumba Casino is here. Play anytime, play anywhere. Play on the train, play at the store, play at home, play when you're bored. Play today for your chance to win and get daily bonuses when you log in. So what are you waiting for? Don't delay. Chumba Casino is free to play.
Experience social gameplay like never before. Go to Chumba Casino right now to play hundreds of games, including online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Live the Chumba life at ChumbaCasino.com.